Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. I know it's been a long day of very interesting presentations. I've seen some of you earlier in our earlier sessions. So for those of us who've spoken before, welcome back. My name is Mutemwa Masheke. I'm a product manager in Azure Governance.
Hey, folks, I'm Arnav. I'm a product manager in the Azure Arc team.
And today we'll be doing a presentation talking about how you can leverage Azure Arc and Azure Governance products to manage your multi-cloud or hybrid server estate. All right, awesome. Yep. So let's begin.
Oh yeah, go ahead. First, we wanted to just thank all of the awesome sponsors. We're all really excited to be here, and we appreciate sponsorship here. Great.
Awesome. So about us, my name is Mutemwa Masheke. I was born and raised in Lusaka, Zambia. And now I live in Seattle, Washington, which is in the USA, where I work for Microsoft as a product manager in Azure Governance, specifically working in policy and the machine configuration space. In my free time, I enjoy singing. Do others enjoy my singing? That's a big question mark, but I do enjoy singing. And actually, fun fact, my older brother is in the back. He's sitting over there. So you can ask him all your questions about whether or not he enjoys my singing. But I'll hand it over to Arnav to take it from here.
Awesome. Hey, folks, I'm Arnav. I'm originally from California, but now I live in the East Coast in New York City. Excited to be here. And, the irony has dawned on us that we have Americans talking about governance in Europe, which I think is the biggest joke. But I work on a product manager again on the Arc platform team, specifically owning the Arc server offering, including all of our fun with licensing, and our GitOps also integration with Flux and soon Argo. Outside of work, I enjoy volunteering. I actually teach high school CS in the mornings and running and music as well. So excited to dive into today's topics. Cool. So today we're going to be talking about governance across your hybrid and multi-cloud infrastructure, which is probably a mouthful. And so we're going to start off and kick it with Mutemwa, who's going to speak to Azure Policy, Azure Resource Graph, and really the robust Azure governance capabilities. And then afterwards, I'm going to speak to Azure Arc, and we're going to show how all of this can really be extended beyond Azure to your on-prem estate and even to other public clouds as well.
Awesome. So we'll start off by talking about this wonderful portfolio of products in our governance for cloud ecosystem. As things evolve, actually, there are a couple new siblings that these products have, but today we'll be focusing on the ones that are highlighted here, which is Policy and Azure Resource Graph. And so essentially, the amazing thing about the way resources are modeled in Azure is we rely on one unified API, which is the ARM API, the Azure Resource Manager API. And why that makes us different from other cloud providers is that our resources are modeled with similar properties, which means that the same intuition that you use to create policies and ARM templates and all other ways in which you manage one kind of resource is transferable to another. And so you have any kind of resource that is available in Azure today and you can create an ARM template on it. You can create a policy on those resources as well. Another really cool, interesting differentiator we have from competitors who will not be named. Anyone from AWS? Is Azure Resource Graph, which essentially is this very powerful query engine that is powered by the Kusto query language for those of us who are familiar with KQL. Essentially, that allows you to explore and analyze the different properties in your resources. We have experiences in Portal and we have experiences in PowerShell, among many others. And we're excited to showcase what that looks like for you today. So kind of going into a deep dive of each of these products, essentially, Policy allows you to conduct enforcement at scale on your server fleet. So we have tons of customers who are managing, thousands of resources across a different kind of ecosystem. Some customers for like server scenarios are looking at Windows and Linux, and they're looking at enabling Arc, for example, on machines that are running AWS or that are deployed through GCP. and they're running our service on Linux distros as well as Windows servers. And so essentially, Azure Policy through Arc allows servers that are not Azure VMs to be brought into our ecosystem to basically have the same enforcement capabilities. And so the cool thing about Azure Policy is it allows for language and expression, which we'll get to see later on as we look at what a policy definition looks like. It allows for enforcement and compliance. And so essentially you have the option to either create a remediation task on a policy, which essentially allows you to autocorrect for any compliance drift on a resource. So for example, if you have a machine that, for example, is in the wrong time zone, for example, or you want to check if a certain file is installed on a Linux machine. Essentially, what you can do is you can use Azure Policy to enforce those specific settings or requirements across your ecosystem. And this applies for Kubernetes, network routing tables, all kinds of things that you're looking to do in Azure. We all have experiences for that in PowerShell as well. And the cool thing about having PowerShell experiences as well is it allows for automation and remediation. So essentially, whichever workflow you use to deploy your infrastructure as code, you can basically write your policy as code as well in JSON, and that allows you to essentially create some enforcement capabilities, which have been tried and true today. And we're excited to talk about that in full later on. Another really cool product we have in our governance ecosystem is Azure Resource Graph. And so essentially, as we talked about before, Azure Resource Graph allows you to explore thousands of your resources, to conduct joins on tables. And essentially what that allows is it allows for you to use KQL as a language to basically explore the properties of different resources and say, for example, I'm looking for a policy definition and I know what the policy definition ID is, but I don't know what the compliance state is, and I want to specify that. So what that allows you to do is through Kusto, you can join those two tables, as we'll see later on, and basically compare the policy ID against its compliance or see what kind of policies overall are available for a certain category, which is an extremely powerful resource that we have available today. You can also do queries on non-compliant policy resources and essentially just say which resources are compliant and which ones aren't. So when I talked about adding new siblings to the governance ecosystem, we have a new product that just became generally available, which is change analysis. And essentially it allows you to basically track changes across different resources in Azure. And so you can basically create alerts and be notified on changes on resources, as well as view the diffs between two resource changes as well. And so this is available in Portal today. And we're excited to hear some of the feedback that we receive from, that's my, thank you. Awesome. Thanks. Cool. We're off to a great start. I almost lost my phone. So, as they say, if you didn't lose your phone in Belgium, did you really go to Belgium? All right. Awesome. So let me end the slideshow and basically just do a very quick demo on what this looks like. So as I mentioned in my introduction earlier on, I am a product manager in a policy-enabled product called Machine Configuration. And essentially what Machine Configuration does is it allows you to basically harden your servers against regulatory compliance standards through enforcement or just basic auditing. And those policy definitions are made available today through our portal experience and our PowerShell experience. And so today, essentially what we'll be doing is we're going to run a very simple sample Azure Resource Graph query where we'll be looking at the product category. And I've just typed in guest essentially just to like kind of bend the query a little bit. And I'm going to be joining on two tables. And essentially, I'm going to join a table that contains like policies that I have assigned on my machines with policy definitions by a specific ID. And so that's why we have like this sort of join function. You can join on so many different parameters. I'm just keeping the example very basic today. And so essentially what I'm just looking for is I just want to know which 5 policies I have enabled today are assigned to some resources. And they should be guest configuration policies. So we have through the Azure Resource Graph Commandlet, essentially you have this command called the search AZ graph command. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out first, and I'll just start by running this query. So I'm going to copy that, and we're searching for all policy assignments I have that have the category guest, as in guest configuration. Okay, cool. So we'll hit run there. Cool. And so what we have here in my terminal is a couple of results on what ARG returns. So as you can see the policy assignment ID, the display name for the ID, the definition ID, and the category, which is guest configuration, as we were looking for. So let's format this a little bit better so that it's more readable for us human beings. So I will just ask PowerShell to just simply format the table. So I'll copy that there and run it here. Cool. So from then on, we have this very lengthy response that is supposed to look like a table, but because the assignment IDs are like super long, it's really hard to know which specific like policy definitions you're looking at. So the good thing about Azure Resource Graph is we have these lines that essentially just parse they basically parse the properties of the resource definition into simple variables like definition ID, category, definition type, that sort of thing. And so now we can sort of use these parameters in PowerShell to format a very nice table that allows us to see which policies are assigned and what definitions they have. So we'll run those and we'll take 5. And awesome. So we have the policy assignments and their definition IDs spelled out there. As you can see, there's like one result from me testing out my demo, which says, please work, because, I was begging for this to work. And so, that's basically a very simple, easy to understand example on how you can leverage the capabilities of Azure Resource Graph and Policy in PowerShell today. There's so many different advanced examples depending on more so your familiarity with the Kusto query language, which I didn't want to delve into too much because this is not a paid sponsorship by the Kusto team. So, but one last thing I will show is essentially the power of having a unified ecosystem that relies on the same sort of single ARM API is all these properties that you can see within the policy definition. Like, for example, the name of the policy, the metadata that's contained in the policy, and like different sort of values that are contained within the policy definition. These are all things that you can query very simply through Azure Resource Graph. And that's what makes us better than AWS. That's what makes us better than other cloud providers, other unnamed cloud providers. And so, keeping to time, I'll hand it over to Arnav to take us further. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mutemwa. So now we're going to be showing how we're going to take that, and we're going to do a little bit of context switching here too. And we're going to take all of those same capabilities and extend that for infra that's running outside of Azure. So just like Mutemwa was sharing, the Azure Resource Graph, the Azure Resource Manager plane, Azure Policy, all of that supports infra that's running beyond Azure. And the way we achieve that is through Azure Arc. One sec, I'm just going to log on here. It did log me off, so give me a quick second.
I think when you mentioned being American, talking about governance in Europe, I think
yeah.
Microsoft probably signed you out.
Yeah. I've actually lost access to my laptop completely in that brief 5 minutes of that joke.
Yeah. I think espionage is a crime in Europe too, so probably.
Oh my gosh. It's going to be rough for me. No. So the core idea here is Azure, we really want to position it as this consistent platform for hybrid and multi-cloud. So when you think about the Azure Resource Manager arm, we kind of think of this as affording customers consistent operations, governance, security, regardless of where their infra sits, right? We know that you have some resources in Azure, the best place, but you might have some resources in other places too, like Edge. You obviously have your private data centers running VMware, Stack HCI. You have resources in other public cloud providers that shall not be named as well. And we want to make sure the ARM management plane is extensible across the board. So how do we do this, right? The core goal is through Azure Arc, we allow customers to project everything into ARM. That's really the core goal. Every single resource, whether it's server, K8s cluster, SQL Server, you take that, and by representing it in the Azure Resource Manager into ARM, that gives you access to all of the different management services we have, like monitoring, like patch management through update, backup capabilities, Defender, and it allows customers to use Portal, which you probably are allergic to, but other customers, not so much, but Shell, which is probably something you prefer, and use that consistently across your Azure estate, but also your on-prem and your multi-cloud resources as well. So what are some of the core offerings that Arc supports? Today we have server, SQL, and Kubernetes offerings that are most popular. And so for server, think Windows, Linux server, physical or virtual, it's domain agnostic, and it supports a really consistent experience like you have with your Azure VMs. Similarly, we have an offering for SQL Server, similar to your Azure SQL capabilities, and Arc Kubernetes if you're running containerized workloads. We have a lot of Arrow customers also running on OpenShift, or customers that are running in GKE, EKS, and other clouds as well. So really focused on the different infra offerings. And we also do connect down at the kind of private cloud level. So integration with VMware, SCVMM. So you also get lifecycle management capabilities if you want to go further than just guest management. So that's just a brief overview of Azure Arc. And the part that's really pertinent and we're going to focus in on is the server management capabilities. We know that's where most of the audience cares. And so that's achieved basically through our connected machine agent. Complicated diagram. I will explain it more in a future Arc deep dive session. But at a high level, you can think of this as establishing a connection to Azure that allows you to use the Azure control plane for management capabilities. And also guest configuration, machine configuration baked right in to that Arc agent. So you actually get all those governance capabilities, not just auditing, by default enabled. So there's no need to have to configure that as well. So I actually want to showcase and just get right into the action here, what this looks like. And first, I'm going to do a quick key summary here. So projecting non-Azure resources, server, SQL Server, K8s to the Azure control plane. We represent it in ARM so we can use all of the Azure governance capabilities mentioned, Azure Policy, Azure Resource Graph, and we support across disparate environments. So hybrid, multi-cloud, and edge environments. So we actually want to show this in action, and we're going to do a security-focused demo. And as PMs, we like to prioritize. So we're going to focus on what needs the most security. We're going to do a multi-cloud demo, and we're going to be looking at TLS settings on AWS. And so I'm going to actually showcase something that just went preview last week. And so, it's an exciting demo when even I'm not sure it's going to work. But it's going to be exciting because what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go in to AWS and we're going to create a connector to the Azure control plane. And we're going to configure to, by default, Arc enable any EC2 instances, any servers that get detected there. And we're going to enforce the TLS 1.2 policy using an Azure policy. And so these are multi-cloud connectors we're automatically configuring a policy to, and they're going to ensure we get TLS 1.2. And so even if we onboard new EC2, new server instances through this connector, we're going to Arc enable them, and we're going to continue that enforcement. So this just shows how advanced some of these scenarios can get in terms of our ability to assign and take Azure governance and extend that outside of Azure. So enough of the spiel and talk track. We're going to dive right in. And so we're going to keep things fun. I'm going to have Azure portal, AWS portal, and PowerShell IDE all running on conference Wi-Fi. So fun stuff. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to create a multi-cloud connector right here. And so I'm in my infra demo environment, and this is Azure. And so this is the new preview capability. I'm going to go into this Northwind Compliance Resource Group, and I'm going to create a test connector. Let's call it Tailwind Risk Connector 2. Oops. Okay, all good. And we can go ahead and set this for East US. We can also support West Europe right here. We'll go for a single account, and it asks for my AWS account ID. Now I do have some handy EC2 instances, and here I have my AWS assets. So unfortunately, we had a new subsidiary get acquired for this demo environment, and they didn't quite make the right cloud platform selection, but we have to protect the assets here anyway. And so we're logging in here. We're going to copy that account ID, and we're going to add that in. We're going to go next. We're going to then select to do the Arc onboarding for any EC2 instances that get detected there. We could choose other connectivity if we have proxy, for example, and we can establish the sync to be however many hours we want. And so we're just going to go with the defaults here. We'll go next. And now we have a CloudFormation template. We're going to go ahead, download that template, and then we're going to go here into EC2, and then we're going to run that stack formation template. So I'm here in my console. I'm going to run that CloudFormation template. And what that's going to do is we're going to go ahead and create stack set. So here we're going to go ahead and create a CloudFormation stack, create stack. Here we go. And I think it's with new resources. And then we're going to use choose existing template, and we're going to upload that template file. We're going to go ahead and upload this file that we just got right here. Boom. All right. Next. And we're going to call this multi-cloud connector. And so what we're doing here is we're actually setting up a connector. And so from AWS, we're giving the permissions to Azure in order to do this active query. We're going to go ahead, next, and we are going to submit this. So now I'm running, I have to acknowledge stuff. See, already forgetting about governance. This is the American beat. No. So now we're creating this CloudFormation template in AWS. I go ahead and click next here, and then next. And then I go ahead and create this AWS connector. And so once this is done provisioning, it's going to periodically assess that environment in AWS. And it's going to make sure that any detected EC2 instances actually get onboarded to Azure Arc. So if I add more EC2 instances, it's going to get onboarded to Arc. And so any of the Azure policies I have, any of the Azure governance, Arc, I might have change analysis running, all of that's going to factor in any of the new EC2 instances, any new multi-cloud assets I onboard, which is pretty neat. So I've gone ahead there and I've done that. And, we don't have all day. So I already have some pre-provisioned instances as well. And so here you see some of those pre-provisioned instances. And so I've already connected some periodic assessments running from AWS. And so this is a PowerShell conference. Unfortunately, it turns out that when you try to connect your Azure account with your AWS credentials on Visual Studio Code, that may result in you getting locked out of your account. So that's why I'm using the PowerShell ID here. Long story short, fun times. So here ahead, I'm going to go ahead and connect my AZ account, run that selection real quick. Cool. That should have the pop-up. All right. And this time I'm going to pick the right account.
The only one.
The only one this time. Yes. I've learned my mistake. So I've logged in. I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to pick that right connection. And so here I have already created a multi-cloud connector. And so I'm going to retrieve some details for that right here. Go ahead. Boom. And so this is going to basically go through and it's going to pick the configuration details for a multi-cloud connector I have. And so I have the Azure CLI there as well on top. And then I have the PowerShell command numbering below that. And so here we go. And so here we get that multi-cloud connector. And so you can see public cloud connector, test org account. And so I can see that when it was created, all of the details. And then I can retrieve the actual solution configuration. So I'm like, okay, what is this actually doing, right? So this pre-provisioned is actually checking for our hybrid connectivity configuration. It's checking in these specific regions. It's doing all of the different AWS account types. So not just servers, it's also pulling in your ECS and everything in an inventory approach. So agent lists for those ones as well. So that's what the configuration is doing. And I'm curious what all got queried in terms of my actual resource group popping up. So here I'm going to run this command. And here you can see all of the different resources it picked up. So it's quite smart and picked up Lambda functions, different hybrid compute machines. So it actually picked up the servers, the EC2 instances, but then it also got the asset inventory of the subnets and the networking involved as well. So this shows how all of that's showing up in ARM. And then you can use ARG, you can use change analysis, querying, etc. with that. So it's a pretty intensive scenario. But we're going to actually use some actual governance here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into that context for that same Northwind compliance resource group that I was just in. So we're going to switch to that one. And there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an Azure policy. So the Azure policy I'm going to apply there is configuring the secure protocol for TLS 1.2 on my Windows machines, making sure that they're at the latest version, and not just auditing it, but enforcing it for my multi-cloud assets. So that way I'm safe to enjoy the PowerShell community dinner later tonight. So I go ahead there, and that was a very deliberate plug. We go ahead there, and we've defined our context. We have our subscription or resource group. What we're going to do now is we're going to pull that definition. So I just have the name for that policy right there, TLS 1.1, 1.2. I'm going to go ahead and pull that definition in. Boom. And we're going to run that. And then I'm going to make an Azure policy assignment based off that definition. So go ahead here. And I'll make the assignment. Oops, it's taking a second. It does take a second for it to create this sometimes. All right. So fingers crossed this works. Here we go. Oh, it's just taking a second to pull the policy definition. So it's querying all of the policy definitions to assign the right one for this. So now I've got the definition. I'm going to go ahead and now I'm making the new Azure policy assignment. So you can see that we've named it TLS Northwind 2. We're enforcing TLS 1.2 on Northwind. This is in East US. I could have made it West Europe. My bad there. And I'm assigning the identity as well. So it's assigning a system managed identity in order to handle the enforcement of the policy on those EC2 instances. And so voila, now any detected EC2 instances or servers in that AWS account are not only going to get projected to the Azure control plane through Arc, but this policy that I've auto run to remediate any non-compliance for TLS is going to actually remediate and make sure it's the latest TLS version. And if it's not, it's going to give me the non-compliance warning and the reason why it's not compliant. So that's how end-to-end and how robust really the integration with the Azure governance capabilities and Arc coming together are. And obviously, you can interact with it on Pretty Portal if you want to, or you can go to PowerShell and really query it and customize as you want. One final thing I wanted to showcase is just like any regular Azure policy, you'll be able to get the Azure policy state. So we're able to see the Azure policy state across the board for all of the different assignments across our environment. And if we want, we're also able to run, and I have a bunch of policies running here, so that's why it's going to take a second. We can also do an Azure policy compliance scan as well, if we wanted to do that. And so if you're interested in visualizing this, you could also go here and we can go to, policy. And here we see with our compliance status across the entire fleet, across our Azure native VMs and our Arc servers, how we're doing. And we're not doing well here because I've not selected appropriate scope or because it didn't load yet. But here, so we see across our fleet how we're doing, and we'll see the policy compliance for what I just deployed pull up here as well. So that's a wrap on this demo. I hope this was exciting. I'm glad it worked. We pulled together AWS, Azure, and PowerShell all together to show I can extend governance across your multi-cloud environments in real time. And it's a little bit trickier than that if you're configuring actual policies and have more of a thorny environment, but this sort of typifies what you can start to do. All right. Over to you with the governance roadmap.
Awesome. I'm really glad that worked, because you never know with with AWS. So we're excited as well to use this session as a chance to share some really cool features that are on our roadmap. And so one really huge item among the many others that we have, actually mentioned it last because I dive in deep. And so we have in preview, we have support for selectors and overrides. Coming soon, we'll have service groups, which sort of maybe allow you to have more flexibility in the way you organize your resources and define the relationships between them. We'll have group policy management available in Azure Policy through machine configuration. So really excited about that. But I also wanted to mention policy versioning because we had a couple of questions that came in earlier today about just the difficulties with managing different policy versions. So we're excited to announce that we're on the eve of version management for built-in policy definitions. And so essentially that will give you the capability to control which policies you inherit, and you can pin to specific versions of policies for built-in policy definitions, and ensure that you're not auto-inheriting policies that might have breaking changes and that sort of thing. And so this is just to allow us to have an easier time with version management for policy definitions as well. So we're really excited about that. And so for the Azure Change Analysis product that we just GA'd, another really cool feature about it is the Change Actor feature, which not only tells you which changes happened, but who made the change, which is super important when it comes to troubleshooting incidents that happen, or like conducting risk assessment to just see like, did someone happen to deploy an AWS resource that, sort of crashed the cloud or whatever, because, you never know. And so if we could go to the next slide. And so for Azure Resource Graph, a really huge amount of the improvements we've made is because of how much demand there is on our service. For example, calls to ARM today, there are more calls to ARM made today than people make Google searches in one day. And so that requires us to really have like very high throttling limits. And so one thing we're proud to announce is that ARG has really expanded just the scale of which you can query your resources in Azure. So we've unlocked quite a lot of limits. You can now port over your resources into a Power BI connector. And so you can kind of visualize what your server estate looks like. You can also query resource capabilities using a new table called resource capabilities, and many other new tables that get plugged into ARG on a daily basis. In preview, you can create alerts using log analytic workspaces. So essentially, when a change happens, you can receive an email about different changes made in your server fleets and that sort of thing. Policy definition versioning will also be available in ARG, so you can query policies by their version, which is really cool. And today, from the query example that I did, I joined between two tables. And one thing that's the limit we have there is 3. But as we said, given the scale of which customers conduct queries in ARG. We're now expanding. Coming soon, we'll be able to expand to join on 6 tables instantaneously and sort of have the similar amount of performance that we know I love from usual ARG query experiences. And then you'll also be able to take a look at queries around virtual machine skill sets, and you'll be able to sort of view the properties on those resources as well as a result. So lots of cool stuff coming up in the governance ecosystem. And as we enter Q&A, we have a couple of QR codes to for you to sort of scan and sign up for. So this is the one on the left, on my left, your left, is the governance and control plane contact form. In case you would like to keep in touch about, different kinds of conversations you want to have about our product ecosystem, then we have that contact form available.
Yep. And on the other side, I don't know, I've left, right. I've lost the kind of sense of direction here. We have the Arc server forum. And so every month we run the Arc server forum, which is a monthly community call. And it's usually like 5 p.m. CEST. So we've learned the time zone here. So it's end of day here and early morning in America. So that way we're able to get everyone involved. And so we have a monthly forum where we share the latest updates. We also record it, put it on YouTube, and we give a newsletter. So that way you can stay on top of everything happening across the Arc server portfolio. And so it's a great way to get involved with us, to provide us feedback for all of our capabilities. And, we have just a bunch of things in preview and coming up every single month. So it's a great way to stay on top of everything. So we're looking forward to connecting the conversation, and we'll just give you a second with the QR codes. Cool. Anyone need extra time? Cool. Awesome. And so if you have any questions, feel free to email us as well. So these are our emails. Do not sign us up for things, but do provide us do provide us useful feedback to our relevant product areas, and we will use some of the non-Azure governance for if you do use us to sign up for things. So with that, we're excited for any Q&A you have, and if you do see us, please feel free to pin us down and ask us any questions you have about governance or about Arc. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Cool.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah.
What do you mean exactly by group policy integration? Is it the group policy from the Active Directory or is it another group policy?
So it's
Just repeat the question.
yeah. So I'm trying to just condense the answer. So essentially, it's the enablement of the enforcement of policies that are configurable in group policy today through Azure Policy, if that makes sense. Yeah. So you would be able to configure the same settings, except it would be through like the ARM APIs that we have available and enforced on-prem through the Arc server.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Konstantin.
Nice. Other questions? All right. Well, you have our emails, and you can feel free to reach out to us if at any point there's anything you want to chat with us with. You did notice that some of the things we showed we were calling REST APIs instead of having actual PowerShell modules. So that's great feedback. If you want us to incorporate some of our capabilities into PowerShell modules, or you see gaps with that or with our CLI, that's something we really look for feedback from. So we'd love your perspective on that. Cool.
Yeah, too. And I also know that a couple of folks might be using like machines to like host Minecraft servers as well. And like, I think that's a very important scenario, and we respect that. And so feel free to ask me questions about what are the CPU limits on like the agents that we install, so that like, it doesn't crash your like Bitcoin server, or, all those things that like, you do with your computer that we do not tell.
Yes.
We just govern.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
When do you plan to add credential support to Azure Machine Configurator?
Lovely question. So that's a very good question. So essentially the work involved, it's done in two stages. So the first stage is I think we're on the tail end of this. I was actually mentioning this earlier today. So we'll enable support for private storage of packages in Azure Storage. And we'll provide private access using a user-assigned identity. So we'll be supporting user-assigned identities. And logically from there, you would be able to reference credentials stored in Key Vault in the package itself. And so that way, at the time of deployment, for example, if you want to do a domain join and you have credentials stored in Key Vault, you can reference that from the config package as well. So it's sort of two steps. So enabling support for user-assigned identities will then kind of allow us to begin the work for supporting Key Vault referencing in the same package.
When you specify in the package, then your path to the storage
Yeah.
where the pull package.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So yeah, that way you can get rid of using SAS tokens to manage your configurations. Yeah. Awesome. Cool.
Thank you.
I know it's quite mind-boggling, so many cloud providers, just,
Yes. Which one to choose?
yeah. All of them trying to be Azure. So
All right.
thank you so much,
Thanks,
everyone. Really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you see us around, feel free to
Yep.
flag us. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.